Chapter 5. The theory of reincarnation was invented in the civil code so that neither plaintiff nor defendant might die regretting that his case had been left unfinished. Comforted by this theory, both could die in peace knowing they still had the next life in which to hear the judgment. The man who was now sitting on the veranda outside Vediji's sitting room had filed a case in the civil court about 7 years ago. So it was natural that in conversation he regularly referred to the sins of his previous existence, fate, God, and his plans for the next life. People called him Langar, the lame one. On his forehead, he bore the tilak of the Kabirpanthi ascetics. Around his throat hung a necklace of holy tulsi. His face was withered by dust and thunderstorm, and his thin body was covered with a quilled cotton jacket. One leg had been amputated at the knee, and he made for its loss with a stout stick. His expression resembled that of the early Christian saint who whipped themselves daily 100 times to mortify the flesh. Shanichar pushed a glass of bhang towards him. "Take this, brother Langar, drink it. There is plenty of fine thing in it." Langar refused with closed eyes, and for a while they both discussed such philosophical subjects as the importance of bhang, the benefit of almond and raisins, the transience of a life, material pleasure, and renunciation. Finally, Shanichar freed himself from the debate by whipping his left hand on his underwear and displaying indifference to worldly subject. He glowed, "If you are going to drink it, then get it down you quite quickly. If you are not, then to hell with you." He leaped into the inner sitting room and offered the same glass of bhang to the principal. Vediji contentedly watched the principal drink his bhang, empty the glass. Principal said, "There's really something great stuff in there." "Bhang is merely a name," said Vediji. "It is and it is not. The real substance is almond, raisin, and pistos. Almonds increase intelligence and potency. Raisins are purgative. There is also cardamom in it. It has cooling effect. As a result, semen does not burst out. It remains solid and unmoving. I'm also making some small use of his beverages in my treatment of Ranganath." The principal lifted his head and tried to speak, but Vediji had already gone on to say, "Just a few days back, he began to run a fever. He had become weak, so I called him here. I have made up a daily program for him. Almonds are also used, 2 leaves of hemp as well. We will see what he looks like when he goes back in 6 months' time." The college clerk said, "He came like a rat, but he will leave like a rhinoceros." "Uncle, just you wait and see." Whenever the clerk called Vediji uncle, the principal was sorry that he couldn't call Vediji father. His face dropped and he began to leaf through the files in front of him. By then, Langar had appeared in the doorway. He squatted down outside rather a chicken and greeted Vediji in a way prescribed in the scripture for a low caste man meeting a Brahmin. This showed that in our country, the scriptures are still supreme and all attempts at the eradication of caste, if not fraudulent, are at last romantic gesture. Langar whined like a beggar. "I am going, respected father." Vediji said, "Go, brother. You are fighting a righteous battle. Fight on, but how can I help you?" Langar replied naturally, "Very well, respected father. In this kind of battle, what could you? When I need someone to speak on my behalf, I shall come and rub my head on your doorstep." Bending forward to touch the floor, he paid his respect and left, hopping away on one leg with the support of his stick. Vediji laughed loudly. His mind is like a child. Vediji seldom laughed. Ranganath was startled to see that when he did, his face softened, gentleness replacing his expression of authority. Instead of virtuous great man, he began to look almost debauched. Ranganath asked, "What's the fighting for?" The principal had begun together the files and checkbook spread out in front of him, under the cover of which he used to come for an occasional early morning glass of bhang. Pushing for a moment, he said he had to get a copy of document from the tehsil office. He has sworn not to give a bribe and to get a copy by the rules. On the other side, the copy clerk has sworn not to take a bribe and to give the copy by virtue. This is what the fight of all is about. Ranganath had an MA history and had studied the causes of countless wars. Alexander attacked India to capture it. Porus resisted to stop him. Sultan Aladdin had said that he would take the beautiful Queen Padmini. Her husband Rana had said he would not give her up. So a war was fought. The root of all battle was the same. One said, I will take, the other, I won't give. This was the reason for war. But here Langar was saying that he would take the copy by the rules, and Clerk was saying that he would give the copy by the rules. And still they were fighting. Ranganath asked the reason for this historic turn about. In reply, the principal quoted his saying Avdi, which literally means elephants comes, horses go, but the poor camel lollops alone. Perhaps this saying had its origin in zoo, but Ranganath managed to comprehend that it means something to do with the length, breadth, and depth of government office. But he still failed to understand the righteous conflict between Langar and the copy club. He put his question to the principal more clearly. The college clerk replied on his behalf, "These are Ganjhavis, difficult to understand. Langar lived in a village 10 miles away. His wife is dead. He fell out with his son. As far as he is concerned, by they are dead. He is a religious man. He used to sing bhajans of the Sant Kabir and Dada. He grew tired of singing and idling around. He went and filed a case in civil court. He needed a copy of an old judgment for the case. For that, you have first to make an application to the tehsil officer. There was something missing from the application, so it was rejected. Then he made a second application. A few days ago, he went to the office to call the copy. The copy clerk turned out to be a real crook. He asked for a 5 rupee bribe. Langar said the fixed rate was 2 rupee. Then the argument started. 2 and 3 lawyers were standing around. First of all, they told the copy clerk, "Brother, agree to do for 2 rupee. The poor man's lamb. He will take the copy and sing your praise." But the clerk refused to budge an inch. Suddenly he became a man of honor and said, "A man of honor stick to his words. I will take exactly what I asked for." Then the lawyer reasoned with Langar. The clerk has 2 family responsibilities. He has to pay for his daughter's wedding. So he pushed up the rate, accept what he says and give 5 rupees. But Langar stick to his guns. He said, "So now it comes to this. The squanders his salary on liquor and meat curry and take bribe to get his daughter's marriage." The clerk lost his temper. "Get out," he snarled. "I am not taking any bribe for this. Whatever is to be done by the rules." The lawyer said, "Don't do this. Langar is a devoted man. Don't take what he says badly." But once the clerk's temper was lost, it couldn't be recovered. The truth is, Ranganath Babu, Langar wasn't wrong. In this country, getting your daughters married had become an excuse for corruption. If one man take a bribe, another says, "What can he do? Poor fellow. He's got a big family. Has got to pay for dowries." The whole stream of crime is following in the name of marriage. Anyway, here has been a series of altercation between Langar and the clerk. Nowadays, there are always arguments over the smallest matter concerning bribery. Before the work was done in the regular fashion, in the days, men used to be true to their words. You put down 1 rupee. Next day, the copy was ready. Now you have got a lot of new, young, school educated boys creeping in, and the rates of the business are all set up. Seeing what the new boys are up to, the old ones to do exactly what they do, like now giving and taking bribe, have now become a big problem. Langar was furious. Placing his hand on his necklace of holy tulsi, he said, "Go, clerk. If you can work by the rules, so can I. Now I won't get a single penny from me. I have made my application. Sooner or later my turn will come." After this, Langar went to the Tehsildar and told the whole story. The Tehsildar laughed and congratulated him on doing the right thing. He said there was no need for him to get the and invoke the bribery. When his turn came, he would get the copy. And he told the clerk for the court, "Look, this man had been driven to distraction for the months. Now his work should be done by the rules. No one should harass him." The clerk replied, "Sir, this cripple is a lunatic. Don't get drawn into his mess." Then Langar lost his temper with the clerk. They started yelling at each other until somehow or the other the Tehsildar managed to restore peace. Langar knew that the copy clerk would find some excuse to reject his application. An application, poor thing, has a life like an ant's. You need not great strength to kill him. An application can be rejected at any time. Too few fee stamps, the file number incorrupted, one column complete. Any mistake like that is posted on the notice board, and if it's not correct by the prescribed date, an application is rejected. That's why Langar is now completely prepared. He's looked up his house and left his village. Land, crop, bullock, he's left them all the mercy of the poor. He's camping in a relative house and drawn to dust, spend his day making round to see the Tehsil notice board. He's scared that some news of application will appear on the board and he won't know. He doesn't want to miss it and have the application rejected. It's already happened once. He has learned all the rules about copying documents off by heart. He has memorized the fee chart. It's when a man's fortune is bad that he is fated to see the inside core of the police station. Langar's luck is bad, but the way he is attacked, the Tehsil this time, it looks like he really will get hold of the document. Ranganath had not yet committed enough stupidities in life to be considered experienced. Langar's story affected him deeply. His mood stirred by the feeling that he should do something to help. But what could he do? He had no answer. As the feeling within became intolerable, he blurted out, "This is all completely wrong. Something should be done." The clerk bounced on his words like a house on a hare. "What can you do, Ranganath Babu? What can anyone do? If you have an itch, you have to scratch it yourself. It's enough for the people to cope with their own trouble. Who can carry another's burden? Nowadays it's like this. You scratch your back and I will scratch mine." The clerk stood up to go. The principal looked about him and said, "There is no sign of brother Badri." Badriji replied, "Some relatives have got involved in a dacoity case. The ways of the police, like gods, are infinite. You know it's well. Badri went over there. He should be back today." Shanichar was sitting near the doorway, letting out his breath with a whistle. He said, "The longer he stayed away, the better." But now the bhang had made the principal forget the current saying that it's wrong to rest. Pulling a large cushion towards him, he lay back contentedly and asked, "What's up?" Shanichar explained softly, "There has been an embezzlement in the cooperative union. If Brother Badri here, he will eat the supervisor alive." The principal was scandalized. He whispered, "So that is..." Vaidyaji thundered, "What is this whispering like woman? There has been an embezzlement in the cooperative. What union is there where a similar thing hasn't happened? Pushing the explain, here has never been a case of fraud in our union, and so people began to suspect something was wrong. Now we can say we are honest people. There was an embezzlement and we didn't hide it. We admitted it as soon as it happened. Joining we concluded we will, it's all ill will. One thorn has been removed from our flesh. Our one worry is over. The principal was propped up motionless on his cushion. He voiced the popular sentiment. Nowadays, people have become very dishonest. This statement is very efficacious and very decent method, like a multivitamin tablet three times a day after meals. But it seems to the clerks contain some personal allegations against him. He replied, "It depends on the individual. In our college, there have never been any trouble like this." Vedichi regarded him cordially and smiled. The embezzlement has occurred when wheat was removed from the seeds grain store. Referring to this, he said, "How can there be embezzlement like this in the college? You don't have a grain store." This was a joke. The principal laughed at once. He started laughing. He couldn't stop. But the clerk seemed afflicted by the hint of personal criticism. "No, uncle," he said, "but there are lots of fodder store. The minds of everyone there are full of straws." This caused even more hilarity. Sanichar and Ranganath also laughed. The wave of the laugh reached the veranda. A few nameless people sitting there also burst into uncontrolled mirth. The clerk caught the principal's eye and signaled him to leave. It is our proud tradition that the real issue only surfaced after 3 or 4 hours of the conversation. Accordingly, Vediji asked the principal, "Anything else you want to talk about specially?" "Nothing. The same old problem with Khanna. The day before yesterday, he was teaching a class wearing dark glasses. I gave him a dress, sing down right there. He was leading the boys astray. I said, 'Look here, son, I will tear you to ribbons on the spot.'" The principal had shown considerably self-control during this speech, but as he finished, it began to mumble. Only a sort of fick noise issued from his lips. Vediji said seriously, "You should not do such things. You should treat your opponent with courtesy. Look, every great leader has many enemies. They have all pinned down their opponent through the power of their wills. This is the principle of democracy. Our leaders endure their opponents with enormous politeness. The oppositions keep on talking nonsense and the leadership quietly plays its own game. No one is affected by anyone else. This is model opposition. You should also adopt these fundamental principles of the politics." Had not affected on the clerks. He said, "That doesn't work, uncle. I know Khanna master. He's an MA in his history, but he doesn't even know who his father was. He's just an expert at politicking. He keeps calling the boys to his house and teaching them gambling. There's only one way to fix him. Get hold of him sometime and thrash him." This made Vadiji even more serious, but everyone else became excited. The conversation turned to the method and tradition of administrating a shoe beating. Shanichar cheered up. "If you are going to thrash Khanna, let me know. It's a long time since I have given a shoe beating. I will come alone to land a few blows myself." One man remarked that if a shoe is worn out and soaked in water for 3 days, it makes a good noise when it lands on the flesh, and even people far away can hear that there is a beating in the progress. Another said that if you are going to beat an educated man, you should use shoe made out of something other than cow leather, so that he will be beaten, but he won't be disgraced too much. A third man sitting on the veranda said that the correct way to give a shoe beating was to start counting 100 blows, and as you reach 39, you forget when you were and start all over again. A fourth man agreed that this was the best method of shoe beating, and so even he had begun to learn to count up to the 100. It was then that the government introduced the new system of village council called Panchayat, and thanks to the great prestige he had earned from his sojourn in Calcutta, he managed to have his cousin made head of the new village council. To start with, no one knew what being the head of the village council meant, and so his cousin had a walk over at the polls. Sometime later, people found out that there was two heads of the village council: Damadin, who had made out township deed for the plots and was the village common land, and his cousins who when necessary would face charges of fraud. Babu Ramadin dominated the village for some time. There was a thatched hut in the front of his house where the young men of the village gambled. One on one side of it, fresh hemp leaves were crushed to make bhang. The atmosphere was very lyrical. He was the first man in the village to grow chana lilies, nasturtiums, larkspur, and other English flowers. There were some red flowers too, about which he occasionally remarked, "These are poppies, and this bugger is a double poppy." His name, Bekham Khervi, was a poet nom de plum, indicating that he was a poet. He no longer wrote, but his good days in Calcutta he had been a poet. Into jail, he had hoped to create a magnum opus while in prison, like other great literary figure had done before, which he would present later to the public with the lengthy introduction. But he spent those 2 years complaining about the jail food, joking with fellow convicts, listening to the warden insult, and daydreaming of the future. When he returned to Shopalganj, he tagged the little Bekham Khervi on its name against to impress the Ganjha with his exceptional character. Later on, when he fell victim of factional politics, not for any particular reason but just due to the influence of the village, or rather national culture, he wrote a few couple of thereby proverb, and Bekham Khervi had a poetical note only of the geographical meaning. Sometime previously, Badri wrestler had inserted a flour milling of machine in another village 10 miles from Shopalganj. The mill worked splendidly, and Vadaji enemies began to say that there was between the mill and the college funds. Ramadin expressed this popular feeling in the immortal words, "Oh, Ramadin Bekham Khervi, what a miracle! He set out to run a college and open a flour mill." There was someone hailed Badri wrestler rickshaw outside the village. It was rather dark, and from a distance Badri couldn't make out clearly face of the person hailing him. "Who are you?" "Yeah, S," he asked. "Don't call me an S wrestler. I'm Ramadin," said the figure as he approached the rickshaw. The rickshawala pulled up suddenly in the middle of the road. The figure was wearing a dhoti and a kurta, but in dim evening light he was recognizable not by his clothes but by his shaven head. Grasping the handle uh, bars of the rickshaw, he said, "You have heard. There is going to be a dacoity in my house." The wrestler jabbed a finger into the rickshawala's back and motioned him to go on. "Ramadin," he said, "so why are you squealing about it now? Call me when the dacoity come to you. The dacoits come to get you." The rickshawala pushed down hard on the pedal, but Ramadin was holding the handlebars so tightly that the rickshaw didn't move. Badri wrestler muttered, "I can't think what calamity can make you stand out in the road, holding the rickshaw and wailing like a widow." "I'm not wailing, I'm complaining. You are the one real man in the Vedaji's house, and rest are of the weaklings. That's why I'm telling you. The dacoits sent me a letter demanding 5,000 rupees. They said, on the last day of the dark fortnight of the moon, go to the southern hill and give the money." Badri wrestler slapped his thighs. "If you want to give the money, go and give it. If you don't, then don't have to give them a penny. I can't tell you more than that. This get going, rickshawala." Vedaji home was nearby. Outside, the bhang would be grounded and ready. Badri would drink it, bathe it, tie a good lion cloth and his waist, pull on a kurta and settle down in a style in the sitting room. People would ask him, "Wrestler, what have you been doing?" He would sit there with his eyes closed, listening to the questions and allowing others present to answer them. The intoxications of his physical strength and bhang would make all the voices of his world seem no more than the whining of mosquitoes. Badri, who had been sunk in such daydreaming, found it highly displeasing to be stopped on the road at this time. He rebuked the rickshawala and repeated, I'm telling you, get going. But how could he move Ramadin's hands still on the handlebars? It's not a matter of money, Ramadin said. Would anyone dare to come and touch my money? I just want to tell you to keep Rupan under control. He's begun to get a big head. He walk on the ground but think he is in the air. Badri wrestler fixed his thighs and leapt deep from the rickshaw. He grabbed hold of Ramadin and pulled him in a short distance away. Why are you dirtying your tongue like this? What has Rupan done? It was Rupan who had this dacoity letter sent to my house. I can prove it. I can't even leave the house for 2 or 3 days, muttered Badri. As soon as my back is turned, his nonsense started. He paused and then said, if you have proof, what are you worried about? He firmly assured Ramadin of his safety and concluded, so then there'll be no dacoity at your house. Go sleep in peace. Rupan is not dacoit. He is a good lad, young lad. It must be practical joke. Ramadin replied with some bitterness that I know Rupan had played a practical joke, but is this joke at all funny? You are right, agreed Badri. It's very bad joke. A truck was fast approaching. Badri's eye glittered in the reflection of the headlights at the snarls of the rickshawala. Pull over to the side. The road, not your father's property. Ramadin knew Badri's nature. Hearing his tone of voice, he said, there's no need to be annoyed, wrestler sahib. But think, is this any way to behave? Badri walked up to the rickshaw and climbed into. When are you not going to be robbed? There's no point in arguing about. Get going, rickshawala. As the rickshaw moved off, he said, I will have word with Rupan. That's not right. Ramadin called him after. He had sent me a letter threatening me and dacoity, and all you are going to do, have a word with him. This call of a shoe beating, not a word. The rickshawala was well on his way. Badri wrestler replied with turning his head. If it has upset you so much, send me the threatening letter, just like Rupan's. Chapter 5. The theory of reincarnation was invented in the civil code so that neither plaintiff nor defendant should die, regretting that his case has been left unfinished. Comforted by the theory, both could die in peace, knowing they still had the next life in which to hear the judgment. This chapter we have already read, so now we are coming to Chapter 6. Chapter 6, Rag Darbari, written by Srilal Shukla. A cycle rickshaw was coming down the road from town to the country. The rickshawala was a long-haired, thin young man wearing a colorful vest and shorts. His face was running with sweat and caricature rather than a picture of agony. Riding in the rickshaw, his clenched fist on his thigh was Badri wrestler. At his feet there was a box. Both feet were jammed against the sides of the box to keep it steady. Badri held the box so tightly that even if he fell out of the rickshaw and boxed his legs, there was no danger of his letting go of it. It was the pleasant, pointless hour of evening. The wrestler village must still have been 3 miles away. He opened his mouth, yawned like a tiger, and mid-yawn remarked, The crop is looking poor this year. The rickshawala was not in a mood to make pronouncement on agriculture, science, and economics. He cycled in silence. The wrestler asked him directly, Which district do you come from? What's the crop like in your area? The rickshawala didn't turn round. A lock of hair had fallen into his eyes. He flicked it back with a jerk of his head. Crops? I'm not a countryman. Thakur Sahib, I belong to the town proper. He swayed his hip from side to side and cycled fast. Seeing another rickshaw ahead, he rang his bell. The wrestler yawned again and went back to staring at the field. The rickshawala was upset to see his passenger so indifferent. To divert him, he began, "My principle, Thakur Sahib, is good wages for good work. I will not settle for 7 annas when I have agreed to it. I stick to what I say." Once a sahib sat in the back here asking was how my family was. He told me the government had given me a bad deal. They should ban cycle rickshaw. What a dreadful thing, he said, that one man should ride on another's back. I said, "Don't ride." He said, "I take rickshaw because if everyone boycotts them, the rickshaw puller will starve to death." Then he began bewailing the fate of rickshawala. He cried a lot. He went on crying and crushing the government. He kept saying, "You should form a union, demand motor-driven rickshaw." God knows what rubbish he was saying. "But Thakur Sahib," I told him, "son, don't get any idea. No matter how much you cry, I will not reduce your 8 anna fare by even a pie." The wrestler had closed his eyes. He yawned. "Do you know any film song, or do you only produce hot air?" The rickshawala said, "There are here, Thakur Sahib, going to the cinema every day and chain smoking cigarettes. I would sing you a song, but at the moment I have got a bad throat." The wrestler laughed. "So what? Are you going to let the name of your town down?" The rickshawala swallowed his insult and good grace. Then, after a moment consideration, he began to sing softly tune of a popular filmy song. The wrestler paid no attention. The rickshawala observed "My brother too pull a rickshaw, but he only takes loads of passengers from certain selected localities." He showed some country rickshawala from Sultanpur a few tricks of the trade, and man began to cry. "I'm an honest man," he said. "Take my life, but not my religion. I'm not getting involved in his sort of business." I told my brother, "Stop it. You can't turn a donkey into a horse by making a trot." They were approaching Shivpalganj as if giving the rickshawala a testimonial. Badri said, "You are a very good man. You shouldn't allow anyone to take liberties with you. Your way of handling things is right." He paused. "But your body is not in good shape. Spend a few months in gym and see how you improve." "What's the point of that?" asked the rickshawala. "You want me to take up wrestling? There's nothing special about wrestling now. In war, when a bomb drops, it kills even the greatest wrestler. As long as you have got a gun in your hand, what difference does it make whether you are a wrestler or not?" Pushing for a moment, he went on continuously. "Wrestling is only a country sport now, Thakur Sahib. In our locality, knives are the craze." At this stage, Badri wrestler became sensible for being insulted. He stretched out his hands and caught hold of rickshawala's vest between his finger and thumb. "Abbe, you have been calling me Thakur Sahib for the last 4 hours. Don't you know I'm a Brahmin?" The rickshawala was startled but amused and almost Gandhian non-violence expression. "Let it be, Panditji, let it be," he said, and began to observe the natural beauty of the countryside. Ramadin's full name was Babu Ramadin Bikram Khervi. Bikram Khera was a village adjoining Shivpalganj which, like the ancient Greek, Roman and Egyptian civilizations, had been wiped off the face of the earth. That is, it hadn't completely disappeared. It was just that inhabitants of Shivpalganj, through their stupidity, thought it had become Khervi, was still preserved in the form of few sheikhs, some records in the revenue department, and Ramadin's old poetry. When he was a child, Ramadin Bikram Khervi had set out for Shivpalganj and followed the railway track to the town. From there, he planned to climb into a train, and so, without intention to do so, he landed up in Calcutta. In Calcutta, he first delivered letter for business, then delivered his merchandise, and later became his business partner. In the end, he became the owner of the whole business. The business was opium. Unrefined opium came from West India, and he received commission for delivering it by various ways to big business in Calcutta. He could also have exported opium from Calcutta, but he wasn't an ambitious man. He quietly carried on his commission business and spent his spare time enjoying the country of visitors from the Western district. He was fairly well known among the men from that area. They praised his lack of liberty, and seeing his achievements, were able to understand how the great illiterate emperor of old like Mughal Emperor Akbar must have run their governments. There was good money in the opium business and the rivalry business. Traders was not too great. There was just one small problem with the trade, that was it was against the law. When his friend mentioned this Ramadan, he used to tell them, "What can I say about this? Nobody asked me before they made the law." When Ramadan was arrested under the opium law and appeared in court before a magistrate who he took the same line. He criticized the English laws and referred to the fact that Mahatma Gandhi had found it necessary to break down, tried to explain that these foreign laws were made in an arbitrary fashion and every single little thing was called a crime. Your Honor, he said, opium is a product from a plant. When the plant grows, it gets beautiful white flower. In English, you call them poppies. There is a different sort of poppy which is red flower. The Sahib grows this in their bungalow garden. There is another species of the flower called the double poppy. Your Honor, these are the facts about this plant. Its leaves and flowers, what they do to the crime. Later on, from that some white poppy, you get this black stuff. It's used as a medicine. To trade it can't be a crime. It's a black law and has made it a crime. It has been made to destroy us. Despite this lecture, Babu Ramadan was sentenced for 2 years imprisonment. In those days, before independence, you were law always convicted and sentenced. But what mattered was speech in court before it. Babu Ramadan knew that hundreds of people, from revolutionaries to this disciples of nonviolence, had become martyr by making such speeches, and he was certain that his speech would make it easy for him to become a martyr too. But after he had served his time and had been released, he realized that to be a hero, he should have broken the salt law, not the opium law. After wandering about around Calcutta for a few days, he saw that he had been pushed out of the opium market. He sorrowfully recited a few verses of poetry at this time, buying a ticket, traveled back to his village and settled down in Chopalganj. He told the villagers this much of the truth, that is, commission between businesses closed down. There was no need to say more. He built a rather small half-brick mud house, took some land and began to farm it. He taught the village boys to gamble with cards rather than with the cowrie shells, and lying on a charpoy at the door. He became an expert at telling tales of his Calcutta days. It was then government introduced the new system of village called Panchayat, and thanks to the great prestige, he Chapter 7. There was a room on the flat roof of Vadaji's house which, like the holy book in the joint family, always remained open. In one corner, a pair of Indian clubs declared that this room officially belonged to Badri wrestler. However, the other members of the family also used it whenever it suited them. The woman of the house filled mountain of pickle into the glass and earthenware pots, left them out on the roof in the sun, and when the night fall, picked them up and brought them indoors. The washing met with a familiar fate. In the evening, on the rope which hung across the room, you could see loincloth and blouse, towel and petticoats all swinging to the fro together. Surplus bottles from Vediji's dispensary were also stored in one of the cupboards. Practically all of them were empty. They were labeled with an illustrated advertisement. Under the heading, before was a picture of semi-human creature, and after a picture of a man, naturally in the pink of health, with a curling moustache and the firmly tied loincloth. From these illustrations, you could tell that these were the bottles which made tigers out of thousands of men. It's another matter that they ripple in the muscle and paste together like only in privacy of their bedroom and bathroom. Outside, they were still no better than goats. There is a kind of literature in Hindi called secret, which is more dangerous than the literature considered sedition under the British Raj, because it was a crime to publish this literature before 1947, and it's still a crime to publish it. Like many official secrets, this literature doesn't stay secret. It provides a very pleasant literary supplement for those trapped in tedious routine of food, sleep, and fear, and traverse the artificial distinctions between classical and popular literature as it is well established in everyone's heart. In fact, nothing very special. It's only recounts how a man behave with another man or a woman, or in a more philosophical language, it is description of the eternal relationship between human being. In English, it is called pornography. The room on the roof was also used for the study of this literature, and obvious as Rupan was only student in the house, it was his preserve. Rupan used the room for other purpose too. He was drawn it to the experience that its elusive joy to discover which others require love of bread, shade of bow, poetry, flags of wine, and lover, and other items recommended by Omar Khayyam. This room seemed to raise high the slogan of peaceful coexistence within the family, and could only fail to fill the hearts of those who beheld it with reverence of local culture. With that in the view, no sociologist could ever claim that there was a slightest danger to the joint family system in the northern hemisphere. This was the room which had been allotted to Ranganath. He was to stay for 5 months. Vediji has been studying his MA and has made Ranganath sickly as it would any normal student. He had begun to run a constant fever. Like any average Indian, he had taken pills from the doctor even though he had no faith in Western medicine. The treatment had not been able to cure him completely. Like the average city dweller, he believed that a fresh country air would cure one's illness and effectively as any doctor's bill. So he came to live in the village. Like any average idiot, he had taken up academic research when he didn't get a job immediately after passing his MA. But like any average man of common sense, he knew that you don't have to stay in the university and sit in the library every day to do research. So he thought he would relax in the village for a while, get well, study, and necessary go into downtown to change his library books. At the same time, his presence provided Vediji with constant opportunities of remarking uh, politely if you were young people weren't so completely useless. We elders would not have to shoulder all these burdens of responsibility. The room on the roof was quite large, and as soon as he arrived, Ranganath stamped it with his own personality. He had it swept and had a charpoy placed there permanently for his use. His bedding took up residence on the charpoy. Rangnath's books were arranged in the cupboard nearby, and banned books, pocket books of detective stories and secret literature from infiltrating them. A small desk and chair were also brought for them and college and other near a window which looked out over orchards and fields. Rupan Babu had purloined some bricks and stone and had managed to fix them together to make a sort of radio. He had run a long wire over bamboo pole on the roof of the room and into the trees nearby, which made it look like Asia's largest transmitter station. But the radio inside could only be heard over a set of headphones, which Ranganath sometimes pressed to his ears to listen to local news reporters and mournful songs of Vaishnavite saints. He could thereby reassure himself that All India Radio was still the same, and despite thousands of complaints and curses, its listen had not budged into inch of its old ways. Ranganath's routine was drawn up by Vedaji's advice. He got up early and then decided whether the previous day food had been properly digested, drank cold water from a copper pot, set out for a long walk, did daily business because in this world that business truly daily, strolled back, washed his hands, face, chewed a tooth cleaning twig, gargled with lukewarm water, exercised, drank milk, studied, ate lunch, rested studies, went for the evening stroll, returned and did some simple exercises, ate a handful of almonds, raisins, and so forth, studied, ate, studied, and slept. Ranganath kept continuously to this whole routine. The sole amendment he made was to place replaced study with enjoyment in company of the Ganjahas in Vediji's sitting room. As this posed no threat to the preservance of the Ranganath's virility and had no overall effect on the entire day's routine. Vadaji made no objection to this amendment. In fact, in one way, he was pleased to have an educated man sit next to him and always ready to introduce him to visitors. In just a few days, Ranganath began to feel that Shivpalganj was like the great Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, what was to be found nowhere elsewhere there was there. What was not there could be found nowhere else. He realized that all Indians are one and that everywhere our mind are alike. He observed that the Indian genius for manipulations and maneuvering existence in the unrefined form of Shopalganj in abundance. This was the same genius which was proclaimed by celebrated newspaper in bold type in front page headline, due to which all kinds of great corporations, commissions, and administrations were formed, fell, and were dragged away. Ranganath realized that his faith in Indian culture unity was reaffirmed. He saw only one weakness in that unity in towns. He had noticed that there was a growing generations gap between old and the young. For some days, Ranganath had imagined that the struggle between the generation had not yet arisen in Chowpalganj, but one day his illusion was shattered and he saw the same struggle was going in village and village politics too. The argument began over a 14-year-old boy. One evening in the sitting room, a man began to narrate the boy's life story. He explained that the boy's talent was for evil was so extraordinary that even the greatest psychologists and sociologists were forced to admit it was miraculous. It was said that several scholars who had qualified abroad had examined the boy's case. Ranganath was informed that by the age of 10 the boy could run so far that a 15-year-old couldn't catch him. By the age of 11 he had become expert at less traveling and avoiding the railway tickets inspector. 1 year later, he began to make passengers' luggage disappear from under their nose, just as clever surgeon administered local anesthesia and removes a piece of anatomy without the patient on the operating table having the least idea where it went. His fame for the kind of this theft knew mainly on the basis that he was never caught. Later on, when he was 14, he was caught. It was discovered that he had become accomplished in the art of breaking the small glasses panel above doorways and opening door latched from the inside. He was breaking into bungalows not by climbing through the window but by opening door as described and slipped into the house through the correct entrance like an honest man. While heaping praise on this book, one man mentioned Behram, the robber who at one time was recognized in the area as a thief of the historic proportion, by the young loudly contradicting the man in a speech like that made in stage assembly, that benefit of logic but delivered at shouting pitch in the by proved that Behram the robber was a nobody.